Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR FM 89.
And hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. It was hardly unexpected, President Biden's plan for Washington to swallow a portion of the almost $2 trillion in U.S. student debt. Neither was the reaction, pro and con. For the millions of Americans with student loan balances, there were cheers. There were Bronx cheers from critics who saw it as one more expensive intervention by government in the marketplace. Arkansans with higher ed loans are carrying a startling $16 billion in college debt. Under Mr. Biden's proposal, about a third of that could be absorbed by the government. But opponents are quick to point out that the government is everyone, us. Many in the Arkansas academic community are supportive of the Biden plan, while most in the state's congressional delegation, for example, are opposed. And litigation to block the administration's proposal is a certainty. Up top, not the merits of the program, not necessarily, but its mechanics. We're joined by Tony Williams, director of the Arkansas Student Loan Authority, and Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl, assistant professor of economics at the University of Central Arkansas. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in. Tony Williams, we'll begin to you. This is, it's not as simple as, well, right off the loan. There's some fine print to this. Bold print and fine print as well.
There is. We've seen mainly the bold print so far, and we're waiting to see the fine print. It seems like the Department of Education is leaking out bits and pieces of information, but we're not seeing any true guidance in writing up to this point. We've got the big picture. We know that who qualifies and the amounts. The $10,000 for most everyone with a federal student loan. And
yeah, Tony, we have a graphic that we can put up here sure. that might help move along here.
Yes, and that's it. Up to $20,000 if you were a Pell Grant recipient, lower income,
right.
And that's probably close to 50% of people with student loans in Arkansas also received a Pell Grant. And so then, yes, $10,000 for everyone else, as long as your income as an individual is under $125,000 adjusted gross income and $250,000 adjusted gross income for a couple. And so it's a very generous gift to student loan borrowers.
It's a philosophical question. It's a fiscal and philosophical question. Is it too generous? Or, as is argued, is it not generous enough?
If you're asking a personal opinion, it's very generous. I think it changes the federal student loan program forever. I don't think it'll ever be the same. I think we will see increased borrowing in the future due to this, because now people will have it in their minds that forgiveness is a possibility. And there are friendlier repayment terms also in the president's plan. And so it's going to should be easier for people to repay their student loans in the future, which will probably result in increased borrowing.
Yeah, we should point out that this plan is not a fait accompli, that even as we speak, in fact, by the time this program reaches air on Friday night, we're taping on a Friday morning, but by the time this program reaches air, the first litigation lawsuits seeking to block the plan may have been filed. At last report anyway, the opponents were looking for, well, it was a matter of legal standing, but they'll find someone. Jeremy Horpedahl, your thoughts?
I think that there's a lot of important questions here. I think about the future of student loans too. I think the big focus now has been on, well, $10,000 and $20,000 for some, but the changes to the repayment plans I think might encourage more students to take on more debt. And what that means is not just today, but over the future course of the student loan and higher education programs, that the federal government's going to be paying a large portion of it implicitly, because they will be either forgiving more debt in the future or essentially subsidizing the payments as people are making them, which it's subsidized now while you're borrowing it, but for many borrowers, they're going to be paying 5% of what's called their discretionary income,
right.
Which is going to be a very small amount. Most plans now like that are 15 to 20% of your discretionary income.
And that is the most significant change, is it not, in future loans that the administration is proposing, or am I wrong, Tony Lee?
I believe that repayment plan will be available to current borrowers. And so this payment plan will be put in effect sometime in 2023. So we still need to see more details on from the Department of Education.
Right. Opponents and proponents of the Biden plan, and there are some who say it does not go nearly far enough, as we noted, and others who say it's utterly irresponsible. But I'm noting, Jeremy Horpedahl, that it cuts across ideological lines. You have economists on the left and the right, business people on the left and right, who disagree about the plan.
Yeah, there's a lot of disagreement that doesn't fall along traditional ideological lines. I think, if you think about, for folks on the left, I think that the working class base of the Democratic Party, they're going to be the ones paying some of the cost of this, and if they don't have college loans or didn't even go to college, they're not seeing much benefit. I think that so that's something which among the left there is very much disagreement, whereas many on the left, I think, see this as great, that the student loan burden has been very heavy and hanging over some people's heads for a long time, and just general support for higher education. So I think this is a debate which is going to be ongoing. As you said in the intro, this was not unexpected, right? We knew this was coming, so this debate, we're just kind of in the middle of a long debate that certainly will not end with the litigation you mentioned.
Yeah, and I suppose we should mention that this is not not the first a loan forgiveness program or a loan modification program from the Biden administration. Earlier, there was an initiative regarding a debt owed to for-profit institutions.
Yes, the president has helped students who attended for-profit institutions with repayment or with forgiving their debt already. And that was under the justification that they did not receive the education that they signed up for and that they paid for. And so, there were cases, I'm sure, that was justifiable.
Some of the research and some of the reading that I have done underscores the fact that higher education can include training in driving a truck or wiring a house, what are regarded as blue-collar jobs, and not necessarily someone who's seeking a doctorate in anthropology.
And that's true. There are trade programs available across the state, very good programs through our public institutions. And so, federal student loans can be used to pay for those. And so, we support that, and I think it's a good use of federal financial aid dollars, grants and loans.
Any way of knowing, Tony Williams, what percentage of Arkansas student loan debt or what percentage of Arkansans with debt are in what are considered trades as opposed to professions?
We don't have good numbers on that. We have a lot of numbers on the student loan debt overall, and you mentioned the amount of $16 billion in the state of Arkansas in student loan debt. That's a huge number, and it's over $33,000 per borrower. And so,
it's about twice the state's general revenue budget, 2 years running, I think.
And so, one thing that I think is interesting to point out in this action by the president, there will be probably $3 billion forgiven in the state of Arkansas, maybe more, depending on, how people participate. And we'll be back to that $15–16 billion level in just a few years. And so this doesn't really fix anything in the price of higher education or student loan borrowing in general. This can be addressed in other ways.
We're not, I think I'm hearing you saying we're not addressing the core issue with this.
I don't think we are addressing the core issues. And I think Governor Hutchinson suggested lower interest rates. I think that's probably a good idea, so that it's equitable across the board. Everyone receives the same percentage benefit. And, and it's something that you can maintain. We can't maintain free loans, in the future.
Sure. Jeremy Horpedahl, the fact that a great deal, anyway, of the student debt applies to those with what are considered blue-collar jobs makes it a bit more politically palatable, it would seem.
Yeah, and, you know, like Mr. Williams was saying, we don't have exact numbers for Arkansas, but nationally, you know, we tend to think of the student loan forgiveness as going to those that have undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees, but there's also those that have either two-year degrees or trade degrees. There's also a not insignificant number that don't have a degree at all. So these are these are those who have dropped out. And nationally, you would probably know better than I, but it's somewhere around 15 to 20% nationally of the total student loan borrowers. They don't have a degree of any sort, and they're not even pursuing one right now. So there's a lot of people who will benefit from this in very different situations. Certainly those that have graduate degrees and have loans. I mean, they have the highest incomes and the lowest unemployment rates. They're probably, you know, the ones where you're not going to get as much sympathy. But I think that a lot of people who either are, you know, going to those predatory colleges, right? They've already done some of that. I think there was a lot of sympathy for doing that. So if we think of, you know, who is going to agree with this as you look across the not only ideological spectrum, but the workforce, there's lots of different people that benefit from this. But I think, again, to emphasize, like you said earlier, you know, this has to be paid for by taxpayers generally, right? And the way that works is, as the government, federal government budgets, they budgeted for this revenue coming over their 10-year window. Right?
We're writing a check, in other words, for this.
Well, we're not writing a check. We're collecting less revenue, which is functionally the same thing from a budgetary perspective.
Right. And a few seconds remaining. One of the big arguments is the time of high inflation and a spiraling national debt. How big a factor could this be?
You know, in the mix of things, it's small, but I'd say it's pushing in the wrong direction. If you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, which they just passed, which I don't think will actually reduce inflation very much, but it's of about the same magnitude, about $500 billion, somewhere in that ballpark. That was an attempt to reduce inflation. This is putting more money into people's pockets. That's the benefit of it. But as you put more money in people's pockets, they spend more, and that can drive up inflation even further. I think it's going to be small overall, but it's pushing in the wrong direction.
Jeremy Horpedahl, Tony Williams, thanks very much for coming in. Thank you for your time, and come back soon.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more on the story. And we are back. Leading the charge to discharge student debt, or some of it, is an organization that takes its name from the number of Americans, Arkansans included, who are carrying student debt. We the 45 million, it's called, and its spearhead is a longtime activist and student debtor. She's Melissa Byrne, and she joins us now from upstate New York. Ms. Byrne, thanks very much for coming in and being a part of the broadcast. It has to be a time of optimism for you, although, as we have mentioned earlier in this broadcast, legal challenges to the Biden program are all but assured. Are you confident that what the administration is proposing can withstand a legal challenge?
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for having me and for covering this important issue, especially helping people know how to apply and be aware of how to get their student loan cancellation. I am confident that the White House and the Department of Education have worked really hard to design a program that legal scrutiny. And so I am 100% confident that people will be receiving the relief that they are owed.
Is your organization and others like it, and individuals who support the initiative, are you asking the majority of Americans to pay for something, for a debt that they did not incur? That's a frequent allegation.
No, I mean, I think that there's a lot of bad faith allegations that are going on right now. We used to have mostly free public college in our country. It wasn't until the early 70s when Ronald Reagan was governor of California that all of a sudden it became en vogue to defund higher education. And then the private banks got involved, and they realized they could make a huge profit off of people going to college. And that started this whole snowball effect to where we are today, with around 45 million Americans having student loan debt, and it impacting people from ages 17 all the way up to like 99 or 100. Every part of people's lifespans are impacted. You have parents and grandparents that are still in debt. You have people that when they finish up school, they have to choose between, can they rent an apartment or do they have all their debt? And I think in a society we come together to make society function. And like, we need nurses, we need teachers, we need people who are educated. And we need to ensure that no matter where you're born in America, whether you're born poor or you're rich, if you do the work to be able to get into college, you should be able to do that work, do that education, so you can start working and then becoming a member of society that's productive.
Well, those who were perhaps victimized by for-profit institutions or bogus institutions have already granted some relief. But a common complaint is that the American taxpayer, many of whom have never been near a college campus, are being asked to pay for those, the debts of those who did go to campus and perhaps didn't even finish their education. Your response to that?
Yeah, so I think like one, it's a misnomer in terms of thinking about who goes to college. I think back in like the 60s and the 70s, college was a very elite institution that a small percentage of the population attended. Now, about 70% of adult Americans have interacted with the college system, whether it is the VOTEC training that's, you have the trade programs, community college programs, or your more traditional like 4-year degree and graduate degree. And so we actually, about 40% of the people with student loan debt didn't finish their schooling. And so I think that's important to understand that it affects all these kinds of families. And you also have people who didn't go to college who have Parent Plus loans for their kids. I think that, I don't own a business, but I'm really happy that businesses got PPP loans. I'm really happy that restaurants got their restaurant revitalization funds. A lot of times in society, I don't have to benefit from every single program to know that I want my neighbors to get the support that they need, because we are all in this together.
Well, some would argue that while some beneficiaries of the program are more deserving of relief than others, that some of the administration's program is targeted at those who are already in the upper income brackets, or likely very soon will be. Is the program, in fact, too broad, too expansive, too generous?
Well, I was fighting for all student loans to be canceled without any means testing or income cap. So the president's plan is not nearly as robust as I wanted it to be. So he took a very, he listened to some of the people who wanted it to be means tested, which also makes it really hard because now people have to file an application. And applications actually make it harder to deliver the relief to the people who need it the most. I know it's like counterintuitive to how we think about delivering policy. But the folks who, you have Catherine Rampell at the Washington Post who keeps talking about lifetime earnings, but you can't eat lifetime earnings. You're not guaranteed lifetime earnings to be at a certain level. And so to me, anyone who has especially the undergraduate debt, you take out the debt because you don't have the money. So it's really means tested upon going in. And for graduate school debt, I want people who grew up poor, who are working class, who are middle class, to become doctors, to become lawyers, to become architects, because our society functions when people can get the education that is right for the career path they're going to take, and they're going to become productive members of society. And right now, because of these extreme debt burdens that go back to the defunding of higher education, and universities are making up the defunding of state and federal dollars into the education system through having students borrow at much higher rates, it hurts people. People aren't buying homes, they're not starting families, they're not starting that business that will then employ people in the community. So what this debt relief does is it allows people to start the businesses, to buy that home, to take care of their kids, put money aside for their kids' college, because unfortunately we need Congress to fix the college problem for cost. So what I'm hoping is that now that everyone's talking about the cost of college because of this cancellation, that in January we can get Congress in shape to deal with making sure people aren't going into debt in the next generation.
Melissa Byrne, we have to end it there because we're simply out of time. We thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for giving us your time. Come back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great. And go Razorbacks.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much. And to Johnson County now. And a farm where the profit comes from protein, but the savings come from the sun. It's Good Roots.
Major funding for Good Roots is provided by Arkansas Farm Bureau.
Arkansas Farm Bureau, advocating the interests of Arkansas's largest industry for more than 80 years. Arkansas counts on agriculture. Agriculture counts on Farm Bureau.
Additional funding for Good Roots provided by the Union Pacific Foundation.
Okay, there you go. This is Infinity Ranch. The name kind of comes from the fact that this ranch has been here for Theron is 8th generation, is that right?
Yep.
And our kids are 9th generation. And I think just the never ending, you know, making it a place to come back to, a place that's sustaining, so it's infinite.
We won the Farm Family Environmental Excellence Award, and it kind of shows how, you know, we work hard on the farm. We try to do the best we can, and we try to advocate for, you know, farm and to do things correct and for the sustainability aspect of it. So it means a lot because there's a lot of work that goes into it.
It's very important to me to be an advocate of agriculture. I think in just the industry today, there's a lot of misconceptions, and so it's important to tell your story. And if you're not telling your story, somebody else is, that's probably not accurate. Definitely through my work with our own children and then with the 4-H program and 4-H youth, I try to raise up little advocates of agriculture.
If you can get it back to the family farm aspect of it and see how farms are produced and how that's just most of them are a family farm just like us, husband and wife and some kids raising cattle or turkeys or broilers or any other types of animals out there.
Your food is grown by people just like us all over the country, and there's not that many of them anymore, so it's a very important job.
Ever since I was little, I've been involved in the day-to-day operations, being around broiler houses and being around the cows. Parents raised me on the farm, and that's just all I've known my entire life. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll go through the turkeys and make sure everything's going all right and there's no problems. Take a look at the cattle as well, and then I'll go to work, and then I'll come back and kind of repeat the process. Then finally get home, see the kids, relax with them. To be a sustainable farm, you have to make investments for the future. You can't be so much worried about the short term. You got to say, hey, 10 years from now, this is where I want to be. So you got to make those key investments, and we thought maybe solar was a part of it. After we had the houses for about a year, you know, we looked at the cost of the electricity cost and thought, well, you know, let's look into solar. And so we started looking at different vendors and got some quotes, and they gave us a production number of how many solar panels we would need in order to offset the cost for the farm.
I think in farming, a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of things that you have to invest in. And so it's kind of looking at it to the long term. You know, it may be that upfront cost, but it's eventually going to pay for itself. I think we just kind of felt that it was the best decision. I wasn't that nervous, and I think I always kind of look at it at a different perspective. You know, we hope these kids come back here and run this farm someday, and just that it's sustainable and that it could help them down the road. I think that's more important and probably makes you a little less nervous.
So the solar panels, you know, only make power when the sun's shining. If it's cloudy, they'll produce some power. It won't be as much as if it's a bright sunny day. And generally they produce the max power from around 10 a.m. to 2 to 3 p.m. You can see it, and that'll be the max power that there is. It first goes to the poultry houses, the turkey houses, and then if we're making more power than we're using, that just goes back to the grid, and we get a credit into the month, into your billing period. Those credits get deducted from the amount of kilowatt hours that you've used to lower your electric bill. The solar panels, they'll last a long time. They're warranted for basically 25 years to produce a certain amount of power. Nothing says they're going to stop working at 25 years. They'll keep making power as long as they stay in working condition, and at 25 years, they're still supposed to be rated to put out 80% of the rated capacity that there was when they were new. And if they fail during that time frame, they'll install new ones for you.
I think any people who are kind of uncertain or unsure about solar panel, I think it's that upfront cost is usually what scares them off. And so I think you have to look at it more as an investment and a long-term thing, and that kind of helps the mindset of saying, well, can we really, you know, go take out a loan and get this or whatever you're doing. I think that's usually where people are kind of nervous and unsure about solar, particularly in farming.
As years go on, cost of electricity is going to go up. I think everybody agrees with that. They've seen if you lived in a house for 10 years, price of your electric bill's gone up. If your electric cost now is $2,000 a month, and in 10 years, that electric cost could be $4,000 a month. But your price is locked in at that $2,000 a month, and then once you get it paid for, that solar cost has gone away, and the electric cost is basically pretty well free at that point. So then that allows your farm to be more economically viable.
I definitely think it was a good decision for us, and I would definitely encourage others to look into it and see if it's a good decision for you.
We always want to make this a sustainable farm, a family farm that's here for multiple generations. We don't want it to stop at 8 or 9. We'd like for it to be 15, 16, keep it going.
We was talking about a tree that we have planted in the bottoms there that I didn't know it was planted, but Dad told me about it. That it was planted about the same time one of his brothers was born. And now that tree's 80 years old and it's a big tree. And I've always wanted to do that for my kids. And, time's passing by, but I like to find a good spot, put a tree out. That way, 40 years, 80 years down the road, you get to see that it's still here. Like I said, we're 8th, 9th generation. You get down to the 10th, 11th generation, that tree's 200 years old. Well, you still got that tree there in that same spot that you've had for that length amount of time.
And that's our time for this week. As always, we thank you for yours. And see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR FM 89.